Hi friends, today we will be exploring 6 different techniques, watercolor techniques, that we haven't done before. So if you've done any of the other beginner series, one of them might be a bit familiar, but these are all new techniques, and I'm going to show you how you can apply these techniques to painting beautiful skies and clouds. They just make your landscape if you can get them right. And it adds so much interest to the painting that you're doing. So we're going to start with just a paper. Mine is Arteza 100% cotton, and it is actually just one that I've painted on the other side, so it's just a rough work paper so that we can practice some of these techniques. So you can get yourself, if you're practicing in a journal or a book, a watercolor sketchbook, you can get that and we can do some of these practices, and then we'll transfer that to doing 3 different beautiful skies. Okay. So first of all, take your A4 paper and let's divide this paper into 6. So I'm going to just roughly divide it in half and then divide each of those into 3. Okay, so if you want to name your techniques, our first one is going to be blending, lifting, water drops, crop in color, salt, and splatter. Now, of course, these techniques can be used for other things than skies as well, like salt you can use for flowers and snow and all kinds of things like that. So these skills or these techniques can be transferred to anything else that you are painting, whether you're doing landscapes or flowers or abstract, but I'm going to show you them for the purpose of doing beautiful skies. Okay, so let's get started. I am going to just use a round brush. This is Princeton Neptune round number 8. I'm going to use my round brush and I'm going to mix a pinkish color that we can use for the sky, so when you look at a sunset or a sunrise, often you will have like a pink or an orangey color in there, a yellowish color. So I'm just mixing a soft pink, and then I'm going to mix a yellow. Now you want your warm yellow color, you don't want the greenish bright yellow for this. Rather the one with more an orangey tone, or even something like yellow ochre will work as well. It's a good color for the sky. And then your blues, you can do like so my pink is like a rose pink color, and then I have more of an orangey tone yellow, and then I'm just going to use like a cobalt blue for the sky. And we'll mainly use these 3 colors throughout. Now, of course, there's many ways that you can blend. You can use some of the techniques we've done before, wet on wet painting, wet on dry painting. Today I am going to do, for this blending, I'm going to do a wet on dry. Okay, so let's get started with blending. So yellow and blue obviously makes green. So we don't really want those two colors to touch each other. So we are going to blend all three of these colors, but we are going to do it in a very subtle way between the yellow and the blue. Okay, so let's start with the pink, and I'm going to start with the pink here on the left. And I'm just doing my pink. Now I'm going to bring in my yellow. So I wash my brush in between. I go into the yellow, but I start sort of over the pink area. Now I paint the yellow. And I'm just going to clean this area because there was some blue that I picked up on my microfiber cloth. And now I start with the blue from this side. Okay, so I'm blending my blue in. Now I'm going to clean my brush, get clean water on it, and I'm going to continue moving towards the yellow. You want to do this before it dries completely, or yellow dries. We can just lift it up here. Might add some more yellow in here. Clean my brush. And sort of just work it until you are happy with it. I might add some blue again on this side. Okay, clean my brush, some clean water, and just bring that color out a little bit. Clean my brush. Okay, so that's my blend over there. The back of this paper isn't the best quality. Okay, now if you imagine that as the sky, darker at the top, have a nice gradient coming down, and then your yellows and your pinks. Okay, so lifting is another technique that we use. Lifting we can often use to either fix a mistake. So if you are quite quick and you had dropped some paint and you immediately pick it up, you can fix that mistake. So let's do that here. Whoops, I accidentally made a drop of pink on my page. I saw it and I was immediately able to lift it up. And sort of, you can still see it very lightly there, but now if I go over it with water or paint over it, it's not going to be an issue. But we also use lifting once something has dried completely. You can use lifting to lift up some of the color again. So I'll show you if you're doing sun rays, for example, but we can also do lifting by lifting up some clouds when the paint's still wet. So let's try those two scenarios. So I'm going to paint a sky over here. I'm painting wet on dry. And while this is still wet, I can actually go and lift up some clouds in my sky. So I'm just using a microfiber cloth here. I'm just doing a couple of clouds. Okay. And then we can give that a second to dry, or of course you can make it dry with a hairdryer. Okay, now once this is dry, let's say we want to lift up some of that color and do some sun rays. I'm going to use a smaller brush. This is my number 2 Princeton brush, and it's from the Heritage range. And I'm going to put down just some clean water over here where I want my sun rays to be. and I sort of work it a little bit back and forth. Of course, you can always use masking fluid, or there's so many other ways that you can, you know, keep an area white. I could have just painted around it, but if you've done it and you need that space, then you can always add. So I just added that water and then I lifted it up. Now let's do the sun rays in the same way. So I'm just taking, there's a bit of water on my brush, and I'm sort of starting here in the middle. You want to just make sure your brush is really clean. And I'm just going to do a couple of sun rays coming out. So I'm just putting some of that water down, just letting it sit for a bit. But we want to do it before it dries, but it does take some time to dry. So I'm letting it sit for a bit, and then I'll take a clean area of my cloth and just press it down and lift up some of that color. So if you had made a mistake and it's already dried up, you can always come back to it, add some water, let it sit for a little bit, and then that way you can lift it up. Okay, and the longer you leave the water, of course, or the more you sort of work it up and down, the more paint you will be able to lift up. But some of it you might just want a softer sun ray coming through, or a softer lift, and there you have it. So let's say you made a mistake over here and you want to fix it. You can put down some water, work it a little bit up and down, and then just dab it away. So watercolor doesn't have to be that scary. There are ways to fix your mistakes. Okay, the next technique is water drops. So again, I'm just going to paint my blue that I've got over here, doing a wet on dry, painting some blue. And now water drops is literally what it is. Water drops. I am going to drop in just some clean water, and because I'm doing clouds, I'm dropping it in the form of clouds. So you might want to just touch lightly where you're dropping it. Some of them you might want to do big, some of them you might want to do small. So just get some water on your brush and just drop it in. Sort of makes like a cauliflower look, if you will. Okay, now once you have that water down, of course you can either just leave it the way it is, but I like it because it sort of helps you to informally create clouds. We want to overthink it. We want to think of the clouds with the shapes, so we, you know, like have these perfect little fluffy clouds. But if you look at the sky, each cloud is different. Each one has got different shadows and all kinds of things. So you really want to sort of be able to not have that much control over it. So dropping in the water helps you to naturally create those clouds, and then you can just go. And all that I will do then, if I'm doing clouds specifically, it depends what kind of effect you want, but if I'm doing clouds and dropping in my water, I might now just go and sort of soften those edges a little bit before it forms a really hard edge. And also by dabbing some of the areas inside will just give you some shadow areas in your cloud as well. So not all of it, working just with a small portion over here of my microfiber cloth. Dabbing those ends so they don't have like a very harsh line. Dabbing some of the areas dry. And there you have it, 2 perfect looking clouds. Okay, so for our next one, very similar. We are doing drop in color. So drop in color, I'm also painting my sky blue. But now I'm thinking more of like a cloudy afternoon, and I'm going to use a little bit of Payne's Grey to drop into my sky. So Payne's Grey is just the best color ever. Okay. So instead of dropping in color, I'm doing the exact same thing, but I'm dropping in some Payne's Grey. And still just a little bit of that paint on the tip of my brush so that you can sort of decide where you want to put the Payne's Grey. Okay. And then once you have that down, you can now go, for the purpose of doing skies, you can now go and add some highlights to your cloud. So just here and there, you might want to do a tiny highlight in your cloud. Not everywhere, just sparingly adding some lighter areas. Okay, so for the next one, salt. Now if you want to paint with salt, you need to have quite a wet mixture, because you want the salt to pick up that pigment and the water, so you want it to be highly pigmented and watery, not very dry. Now of course the salt, you can spread the salt, like when you're doing a roast, you can spread the salt all over, but for the purpose of doing clouds, I'm going to put them in little clusters. So just controlled, thinking of these fluffy clouds. Where do I want to put them? Of course, you can also do snow. So for snow, you would have it a lot less, and you would just sort of have a little bit of sprinkles all over. Now with the salt, you might not immediately see an effect, so we just leave that one to dry, and we'll come back to it a bit later. Okay, and then our final one is the splatter. Now for a splatter, you want a really watery mixture of any color really. I'm just going to go in with Payne's Grey, and something like a round brush works really well for a splatter because it picks up a lot of paint. So I'll take my round brush number 8 that I've got here. You can also experiment with small brushes and larger brushes to see which ones give you the best splatter. And then sort of you just hold your one brush here, the one with the paint goes on the top, and you just lightly tap it, and that will give you a splatter. Of course, there's many ways that you can tap it, harder, softer, more from the side, depending on the size of the splatter that you want. Okay, now let me see if I can show you a bit close up what the salt is doing. So, let's focus there again. Okay, so I don't know if you can see, but it's starting to form these little tiny white areas where it's picking up the pigment. And same here with the sort of the snow effect. So the salt will just take up all of that pigment that you've got, And once this is nice and dry, I can just wipe off all of that salt. Okay, so let's move on to painting 3 skies using all 6 of these techniques. So get yourself either 3 pages or 3 pages in your journal, or 3 A4 pages, or 3 rough work pages if you want to first try them on, or divide your pages, but prepare 3 pages and we will come back to these techniques and paint 3 different types of skies. Now for our first sky, we are going to use 3 of those techniques. We will be using blending, water drops, lifting, and some color drops. So we will be using 4 techniques. I just thought, oh, let's do the color drops as well, to add some shadows into our clouds. Now, later on in this series or in this course, we are going to have a look at composition and perspective. But I do just want to highlight in this one, while we are doing it, that if you are, for example, painting a sky that like a sunrise or sunset over the horizon, boats being far away and tiny, and the things close to you and the clouds above you are bigger, I want you to think of like a 1-point perspective. In other words, you're standing here and you are looking out this way, and we sort of have these imaginary lines going out and then these are basically the shapes that you're going to paint in. So your horizon line is here at the bottom. Your clouds here, these are the ones closest to you. They're going to be the biggest. And then as we move down into our in our sky, closer to the horizon line, these clouds are going to become smaller and smaller. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you are painting, but it is just also as a reference. So I'm going to mix 4 colors that I'm using for all of these 3 skies that we are doing. So the first one is a rose pink color. I knew I was going to mess some way. So rose pink. Then I am doing cadmium yellow. So again, as I said, it's the yellow with more of an orangey tone, a warmer tone, instead of the yellow with a greenish or bluish tone. Then I am doing cobalt blue. And then the last one I'm doing is Payne's Grey. Payne's Grey is always my shadow color for clouds. Okay, I'm going to give my paper just a spray. So I'm going to be painting wet on wet here. And I haven't mounted it down, and that's why it's doing this. It's buckling a little bit. But let's go. So starting with the pink. So same as the blending we've done before. Okay, going in with some yellow. Bringing it down into my pink a little bit, so it's a bit of an orangey color. And then just taking it out here just with water so I can get a gradient going, softer and softer. And then I wash my brush and I go in with the blue from the top. You want your sky to be darker at the top, and then adding more water as you go down. Cleaning my brush in between, just using some clean water to blend these colors here. Okay, now let's do some water drops. So I am going to make a nice big cloud here in the middle. Some water on my brush. And try and just flatten this a little bit. Okay, so just dropping in that water. Doing another one here. Run a bit more down. Now, because I've not mounted my paper on, it's all running into the middle. I don't want that. So I'm just just dabbing it, lifting some of that puddle up. Putting some smaller clouds in here. And then as we go down to the horizon, we make those clouds even smaller. Okay, now these ones at the bottom, this is actually already dried. So I am going to just give them a second to sit and lift up some of that paint. I'm going to start now here at the top. I'm just going to use paper towels. I'm going to start to just soften some of these edges like we've done before. Lift up some of this color. And just dab some of these areas dry. Now you can wet your paper towel just a tiny bit if your paint has started to dry. Okay, now we do the same thing for clouds over here. Make sure you're using the clean side of your paper towel as you move into the yellow and it doesn't have any blue on the top still. And we're just lifting up some of these clouds over here. and you can soften any harsh lines that it made. And then we'll just go and lift these ones up. And then we can just do a little bit of a color drop into the cloud. So just a very soft Payne's gray mixture that I'm just dropping over here and there. These ones I might just leave, just adding some depth into my clouds, some shadow areas. Don't like the shape the water drop made here, so I might just work it a little bit so that I can lift some of that up and change the shape to what I want it to be. Adding some shadows in here, just some drops of that color. Not really thinking too much about where I put it. And just having some fun with it. Okay, and then same with this one. They might just have like a little light idea of blue. Okay, and then you can always go back and just soften some of these again if it's made a mess. There we go. Okay, so there's our first sky that you can do, and we have used all of those techniques to do it: blending, water drops, lifting, and color drops. So our next one that we're going to do is going to be lifting, drop in color, and salt. Actually, it's just going to be salt and drop in color. So salt and drop in color. Okay, so this one we're just going to paint a blue sky. We're not going to do any blending here. So I'm just going to use my cobalt blue, and I'm just painting a sky. Might just start again spraying my paper. And just paint my sky. So this time I'm not doing it as a perspective. I'm still going to do the top clouds bigger. So just a beautiful gradient, softer at the bottom, and then having it all nice and wet, we can drop in some color. So dropping in some of that Payne's gray for my clouds. I just do a couple of large clouds. So these are actually going to be our shadow colors. Well, just the one shadow color. And we are going to add salt to this. So there we go. These will be my shadows in my clouds. And let's drop in some salt. I'm going to try just to drop it on these, like the outer line where I've put this darker color. Some on the edges, and this will just create some shadows already there with the darker color. You can always now go and drop in some darker color even still in your shadows. Okay, and then we leave that to dry. So what I mean by dropping in some darker color is you can go and get some Payne's Grey, darker mixture, highly pigmented, and just go and literally drop it in some areas if you want to create even darker shadows in your cloud. Okay, so let's move on to our final sky that we're going to do. And we are going to do drop in color, lifting, and splatter for that one. So drop in color, lift, and splatter. Okay, now I'm going to start with my yellowish color, but I'm actually going to do a yellow ochre just because I quite like these two colors for the sky. So I'm doing yellow ochre at the bottom and then Payne's Grey top. So yellow ochre, and then Payne's Grey top. Using lots of water to bring those two colors together. Okay, now we have our sky. So let's lift up some of these, some clouds over here. Actually, I'm first going to drop in color. So I'm first going to add my clouds, but I'm doing it Payne's Grey, and I am going in with the big brush. Okay, so it's already dried up here at the bottom a little bit. Let's do some softer clouds. Okay, so once I have these clouds in place, this is really dark clouds, I'm just going to lift up some highlights in them. So we don't want these big puddles. So I'm just adding here and there. I want to add a little bit of a highlight in my cloud. I might use paper towel for this. So just tiny bit of highlight in the clouds. Try not to think too hard about where I'm putting a highlight, just mostly on the top of each cloud. It's still very wet, so there will be some bleeding happening on the page as well with these ones. Now this whole mixture you want to be quite wet so that it can be very flowy. Okay. And now let's add a splatter to this. So I'm actually first going to just make a very watery Payne's grey mixture. And once I have that, I'm going to give this one spray because this area has dried already. So particularly here, just one spray over. I want it to be more watery and flowy, and I'm just getting my very watery mixture of Payne's grey, and I'm going to add some splatters. And this might give the idea of distant clouds as they bleed together, or highlights or shadows. And then as it dries, we can always go back and just soften some of the edges if you'd like, or lifting up areas where you want to lift up again, or if a splatter ended in a place where you didn't want it, you can always just go and change that, lift it up. So there we go. Okay, and there you have it. Nice stormy skies. So I hope that you have learned something today and that you will create some beautiful landscapes using some of these techniques in your skies. Please share them with me on Facebook or Instagram if you do paint any of these. I'd love to see it. Watercolor Wellness, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you have. YouTube, of course. That's where you found me. And yeah, happy painting until we see each other next time.